Ukraine is a country known for its natural land beauty with things like wheat fields, corn, and trees covering most of the Ukrainian territory. Ukraine is full of rich cultures and traditions, and if you do visit Ukraine, you should definitely consider visiting one of the many tourist destinations like the churches or beaches. Let's take a look at some of the things that make up the Ukrainian Republic. Ukraine is quite a patriotic country, with the only getting its independence in 1991 from the Soviet Union. Ukraine has its own traditions, culture, and even language, with more than 60% of people living in Ukraine considering Ukrainian to be their native language, with others considering Russian or Crimean Tatar to be their native language. Ukraine is also quite a religious country, with much of the population being Ukrainian Orthodox or Ukrainian Catholic. This is shown by many of the churches and cathedrals that are some of the many landmarks that you should visit that happen to be in Ukraine. Ukraine is very much known for its art, such as dolls, embroideries, and ceramics, which is a heavy part of Ukrainian culture. The art can also be shown and represented on traditional Ukrainian clothing. Some famous Ukrainian painters are Ivan Marchuk, Vladimir Borovikovsky, Mykola Pomenenko, and Vasyl Krachevsky. Pop culture is heavily part of everyday life in Ukraine, and this is shown on the music and even lifestyle of most Ukrainians. For example, many Ukrainians may listen to Western or Russian music, but some may choose to listen to Ukrainian music, which is typically folk music mixed with pop culture music. One popular artist in Ukraine is Olesya Zayats, and she is a good example of a singer who mixes both Ukrainian folk music in a more modernized, upbeat way.
Її мова солов'їна на весь світ лунає, квітне у віршах, поемах, в душах визріває.
Overall, Ukrainian music and art is very unique and starting to get heard and seen by people around the world. Ukraine has a noticeably bad problem with pollution, and this is due to many factors, some of which being aging infrastructure, coal mining, and vehicle emissions. Another problem that mainly affects northern Ukraine and southern Belarus is the Chernobyl nuclear disaster, which took place in 1986. This disaster caused extremely bad radiation fallout, and to this day, Pripyat, Chernobyl, and places in the exclusion zone are almost completely abandoned, and the only people that live there are a few villagers living inside the zone with nowhere else they can really move to. But disregarding the environmental problems, Ukraine is a very flat country, with mountains generally only on the borderline with Romania, Slovakia, and Poland. This makes it a very agriculturally rich nation, with wheat being one of the staples of Ukraine. This is also shown by the country's flag. The yellow on the bottom represents the wheat fields, while the blue on the top represents the sky. Ukraine overall has one of the most beautiful fields and land in the world. Ukraine has made many technical and scientific achievements in the last few centuries. There are many medical and science schools in Ukraine, with the best being the National Technical University of Ukraine, Kyiv Polytechnic Institute. One interesting fact about Ukraine is that Ukraine is home to the second deepest subway system in the world, right behind Pyongyang. The reason it is so deep is partly due to the Dnieper River and hills in Kyiv. Ukraine, notably the capital Kyiv, has an excellent public transit system with trams, buses, and metro systems. Ukraine even has its own airline called Ukraine Air, or UIA for short. Ukraine has made many scientific and technological achievements, and we can expect even more to be made soon in the near future. Just like any other country, Ukraine has its own form of government and its own political system. Ukraine has many allies, with the closest being Canada, Poland, and even Lithuania. Another close ally is Russia, but they have a pretty rocky relationship due to factors which will be discussed next. If you go onto Google Maps and click on Ukraine, you will see that it is not circled in red. Why? Because Ukraine has disputed territories, pretty much all with Russia. Let's look at the most notorious, the Crimean Peninsula. The Crimean Peninsula was annexed from Ukraine by Russia in 2014, but most countries internationally view Crimea as Ukrainian territory, despite the peninsula being more than half Russian and predominantly Russian-speaking. The second disputed territory is eastern Ukraine. It isn't technically disputed, but it is virtually a war zone between pro-Russian rebels and Ukrainian forces. The city of Luhansk and Donetsk is the epicenter of the violence, and it is constantly being struck with airstrikes and sometimes completely closed off. Despite this, hopefully peace will be brought to these regions one day, but until then, we can only wish the best for Ukraine and the people living in those regions. Overall, Ukraine is a beautiful country that you should definitely consider visiting. Beautiful scenery, rich culture, and warming hospitality. Ukraine is definitely a country you should put on the top of your bucket list.